First things first, I can't sing, but I really want to say thank you for that song because it really did make me proud. So let's give another round of applause for Daniel Green. Daniel asked me straight out tonight to speak about why should we be a republic? Why do you think that? And it was pretty simple. Because Australia as a constitutional monarchy isn't who I am, and I don't think it's who we are. And we've got a lot of work to do to seize our future and meet the challenges of it. To do that, I think we need to be true to who we are. So part of this journey that LFAR helps us embark on is to ask ourselves who we are, individually, who each of us thinks our nation is. And a song like that puts us in a frame of mind that helps us do it. And so when Daniel asked me to speak on that, it cast my mind to another moment I had to try and think about the same thing. I had specific reference to the Irish story as well. I wrote a book about my great-grandfather who went off to Gallipoli and helped in the evacuation. And in the course of that, I had to make up and reimagine what his wedding was like to my great-grandmother, who I'd never met. And so I did the research on our family, but the rest of it I had to make up. And in thinking about each of our origin stories, we know a little bit about the history, we kind of make it up. We use those stories to address our future. So in me sitting down and writing that, I was doing a little bit about what each of us needs to do as well. And so the story was, my great-grandfather got married while his wife was pregnant. And so that to me was a beautiful origin myth, because Australia is fundamentally illegitimate and a bastard country. And in telling his story, I was trying to tell my story, but I was trying to also tell the story of our country through one person's moment in history. She was Catholic, he was Protestant. She was 5 years older than him. Family legend, by the time I got to me with it, she was 11 years older than him, but I checked the books and it was 5. His immigrants had come from Scotland, they were the economic migrants. Her immigrants had come from Ireland during the potato famine, from various parts of other parts of Europe. What I didn't know is also that there were a whole stream of proud German immigrants who had come out when those potato famines moved east across Europe to the 1848 hunger riots in Germany. They were political refugees. I didn't know that. Now at that time when they got married, we had a formal White Australia policy. And that, like many other things in my past and our past, are things we need to move on from. Acknowledge, never forget, and move on from. The monarchy is another one of those. And in that White Australia policy, they were all part of it. All my mutts and bastard ancestors were all part of it. But when they went off to the First World War, they let my great-grandfather go because he was not quite so German and just Australian enough to go to war. But they locked up some other Germans who were a bit too German to go to war. Now that's something else we've got to leave behind. It's something else we should no longer do and should try not to do. So it was an interesting moment in time in my history and in Australian history. And some of those things I'm proud of and some of those things I'm not. We all need to be big enough to be able to acknowledge those things, seize the ones we're proud of. But in my own origin history, in sitting down and making that up and researching that and trying to be true to it and trying to help us think about that past and our future, a couple of things came to mind. Firstly, we have some absolutely essential origin myths and truths in Australia, and we have some distracting and false ones. One of the false myths is that Gallipoli was the birth of our country. Utter nonsense. In 1914, Australia was the richest country in the world. We'd introduced female suffrage and the pension before most other countries in the world had thought twice about it. We had invented our own footy code, we'd built institutions like the State Library, we'd sent Mawson to the South Pole, we'd had the 888 movement and the Harvester Judgment. We were effortlessly exceptional.
Yes.
And we didn't quite know it, but we were. Now, the First World War wasn't our birth, it set us back on our heels for 2 generations. It's a false birth myth. What we are effortlessly exceptional about now is we are by far the best country in the world at bringing people together from all around the world and creating a safe and vibrant and dynamic multicultural society. I'll get to that in a minute because it's the second but not the first reason to become a republic, in my view. So we were effortlessly exceptional But we have a false origin myth about that. The second false origin myth is that British so-called discovery and occupation is also our origin, and from that we should assign our leadership of head of state to the British monarchy. And that's a false myth. And where I get in thinking about those two things is there are two absolutely fundamental reasons that are true to me, and I think true to most Australians as we think through why we should be a republic. And they are imperative, and they are in this order of priority, and they are in this order of priority in the next 10 years, when I very much hope we can, together with our neighbours and our citizens, fellow citizens, embark on a journey to get this done, so that we can embark on a much longer and more exciting journey to get the rest of our destiny done. And the first is an absolutely true, collective, unavoidable source of our origin is the Indigenous society in Australia. For 40, 50, 60,000 years they were here, and the utter brilliance of that survival, 600 languages, of the culture, is what makes us tiny. All of us, Indigenous and non-Indigenous now, tiny and standing on the shoulders of those giants. Until we can recognise that, we don't know who we are, we don't know where we're coming from, we don't know why we're here. So before we ever get to thinking about a republic, we have to have fundamental constitutional recognition of that very fact. Those two things have to go in hand and in that order. We are so distant from recognition of that past and learning what its true implications are for us to be standing on those giants' shoulders, that the opportunity for us to catch up and enrich ourselves is simply tantalising, and I think we won't know what hit us if we make that recognition but do the rest of the work to understand what the true implications of that origin for us all here is. So that's number one. The second thing, as I mentioned before, is that what we are by far the best at in the world, Canada's a distant second. This isn't the Olympics, this is bringing together people from around the world to create a modern, diverse, multicultural society. We are unique, we are brilliant at it, and it is our universal origin myth. Whether you're a convict, as my folks were in the 1830s, whether you came before that, whether you've come like Sophie Smell tonight off the boat from a mixed marriage in the south of England, any one of us has exactly the same claim to be here and be part of it. The absolute brilliance of this place is the shared values, the diversity and the strength we draw from each other in addressing the challenges of our future. And so we've got to recognise that, and in recognising that, we'll recognise that we're all equal, and any one of us, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, recent or ancient, could equally represent our country and might have the chance to do that. We'll also recognise that there's the rest of the world that could never do that, and that a British monarchy could never represent us. Only one of us could do it, but any one of us could. And when we get to that, we'll actually have a connection with our values, both the ancient heritage of our values and our current lived values that we all draw on to identify ourselves, to recognise our past, but much more importantly, to use those values to seize our future. It's that simple. We need Indigenous recognition in the Constitution. We need a republic.